Hey there, Frank. Thanks so much for getting that mock-up together. I think that's really going to help some of our viewers who need to kind of hear what's on the score in some form. Having said that, those Garritan sounds, I think are they bundled with Finale. Try out Note Performer, which is what I use and what I think a lot of the scores in this are intended for, like intended to have been mocked up with. So maybe check that out. I think it's only like was it $140 or something like that. It's not too expensive. Anyhow, just kind of looking at everything in the score, I'll make a few comments about notation and other things first. Then we'll talk about the overall orchestration. First thing is, I can hear past the mock-up, so I don't, I'm not troubled at all by certain defects in that playback right there. All pretty clear from looking at it what you intend. But there were a few things that the mock-up did accurately portray, which I feel maybe just need a little bit more work, okay? But let's talk about a few things in terms of notation first. Okay, so here we're really not giving our brass players, our heavy brass players, time to change to their mutes, right? It just doesn't really feel like, I mean, it's 2.5 beats, and I know the tempo, the way that you have mocked it up is not too fast, but the actual tempo really is quite fast. It's kind of like what you might translate as molto vivace, right? So it's intended to be lively, and so that's really not going to give players the amount of time that they need to switch over to mutes, ideally. Anyways, I mean, some mute changes can be incredibly fast, but I always feel there's no sense pushing it. A couple of other things. Secco. This is not a technique text. This should be expressive text. It should be under the staff rather than over it. And once you've marked it the first time, you don't need to mark it on every other beat. What the best thing to do would be to just mark secco sempre, right? And then when you get to a normal, just go norm, right? And that you can do over the top, right? But I would say secco should go under the staff. And everything else, I think, divisi could just be div period. And yeah. And otherwise, I'll just mention any other notational peculiarities if they arise, okay? So, on to the orchestration. So first, let's talk about the orchestration of the melody here. There's a lot of exaggerated legato here, and that's something that, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and it's cool to see somebody experiment with that over the course of this challenge. It's great people have so many original ideas and different approaches. This one, I would say, is just a little too slidey for me, and then, I mean, I can't sing with two voices, but you get the idea. Ba-da-da-da. I feel that the overhang, maybe, I don't know, it doesn't quite do it for me. It's just a matter of taste, though. I mean, that might be the way that you see it as well, that you see it as being better, as opposed to just legato, right? Here in this particular treatment of the melody, I don't feel like the flutes are really going to add a whole lot, right? We've got the flutes and the clarinets mostly playing unison, and then things change a little bit right in here as the oboe takes over, right? And oboe and clarinet, and so on. So from here, it's actually pretty well orchestrated. Here, I would say if the clarinet were pianissimo and the flute were piano, I think it would be a better balance right in here. If you really, really want that combined sound in lower register flute plus throat tones clarinet, throat tones lower chalumeau. Anyhow, I mean it's also it doesn't really phase, but it has a kind of a band-like sound. Do you know what I mean? It it doesn't have that super smooth kind of sound that you would get from, say, two flutes in unison. But yeah, flute plus clarinet. There's a I'm not going to say crudity, but it just is a kind of a unpolished sound to me, to my ears. Clarinet plus oboe right in here is much smoother, and then getting up into this higher register, oboe plus flute and so on. This is all really great scoring. It's really great that you keep the horns extremely soft, right, for the most part, and then we're pushing towards something, but what is it, right? Piano crescendo what? I think that right in here you should really, I mean, you don't really have to, I mean, like, obviously mezzo piano, right? And this pianissimo to piano. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to mark it, but maybe leave that up to the conductor, but still, yeah, I feel like people might want to know where they're going. But it's not totally necessary. The thing about it is that you are just telling your strings to go pianissimo to something, and that something has got to be bigger than the brass, right? So, and that's not marked either. So it's just a question of who is arriving where at what dynamic. So right in here, if this were mezzo forte, which I think it wants to be, so mezzo forte, that balances against the forte of the harp, right? And then and then you can just leave. See, if this is a forte, and then you leave the piano crescendo destination dynamic off, then that's fine, right? Because we can see that there is a certain supremacy of of weight here in the strings, and I would assume in the winds. But like here in the winds, we're not really getting all that much bigger either. So my sense is that just the way this is scored, it's a little unclear, right? And there is a danger at the first reading that the brass will be a little bit too loud in here, right? I think that the level of the strings right in here could come up quite a bit, in terms of impact. If you just really want some radiance in this chord, keeping it to piano will have a really limpid sound, and it's still cool, but just, yeah, these brass really do need to be controlled. Like piano crescendo in the horns is going to overwhelm just straight pianissimo crescendo in the upper winds, right? The overtones are going to kill it, which is something I talked about in a few previous evaluations. Okay, but I really like the way that this draws off, and then you start da 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 dum. All right, da 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 da. Right, and yeah, keeping it mostly really soft brass right in here. People might have noticed something about the playback, and that is that you really could not hear this melody right in here for these two bars as played by first trumpet. Now that is not something that will be a problem in real life. Okay, Garatian, or I'm guessing this is Finale, and the Finale playback engine just doesn't understand how to make that louder, or there's no impulse to it. I think with Note Performer, this would be a lot clearer. All of the mock-up would be a lot clearer. So far, you might have noticed that I really have not pointed out anything too problematic with the scoring in general. I feel that it works pretty well. There's a nice blend of lower winds and brass together. that's all very workable. It's really nice. Right in here we have these sort of shifting textures in the heavy brass and horns, and just like little touches of strings. I feel these little touches, I mean, for what they're worth, the pizzicato is probably the pizzicato and the divisi basses are probably going to be much more prominent elements, really, than just these little bits of string texture right in here. It is nice the way that you add on more middle winds right in here. That's very, very cool. Okay. It might be slight overkill to add bass drum plus secco timpani if you want a soft timbre right in here, right? Because the bass drum is going to have a pulse like that kind of pushes at the air in the room. Here, not such a big problem, but maybe here it will, it may choose to punctuate the music with the wrong stress, right? Okay, so now here we've got more prominent celesta. Bum, 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 bum. And here I would say, like, it's not as big of a critical problem. This one problem that I've been pointing out throughout the past few evaluations, the past couple dozen evaluations, that there's this bit of an overhang dynamically that can sort of kill what's following. And it's not as big of a problem here because the dynamic is very soft at the beginning, right? Now, keep in mind, I'm about to turn the page. Keep in mind that the scoring so far for this entire screen has been extremely soft, right? I suggested that there could be a brightening of the timbre by bringing up the dynamic level overall, right? Okay. And certainly in a regular balance, like if you really were going to keep this at pianissimo crescendo, there wouldn't be any need to mark the harp any louder than mezzo piano here. Okay? All right. So that's one thing. So keep in mind, everybody, the dynamic contour, because I'm just about to refer to it a little bit more. Okay. So this celesta will come through fine at with these colors and this level of force. And yeah, this is pretty good scoring, I would say. It's all going to work pretty nicely. Okay. That's neat, the little clarinet back and forth octave. Okay, but the only thing I would say here is there's just not enough textural difference, so it just really has to be one of emphasis and nuance, right? So like it isn't like you're doing winds echoed by brass or strings echoed by winds or whatever, or even percussion echoing some other element. So really it's just there are different voicings sort of in these parts, but really not significant. It's really just kind of a drop of an octave, right? With that, with the piccolo part now being played by the top line of the flute, right? So, yeah, slightly different voicing in the chords, but essentially it's kind of the same thing, just down an octave and softer. And that's cool, all right? But it just all, it's all down to the nuance. Correct? And just really finessing the dynamic level. All right, now let's turn the page. According to this particular arrangement, here's our first taste of real strong dynamics. Bum, 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 bum. All right. Excuse my throat clearing. It's very early in the morning here. So, bit of a tam-tam hit there. Nice roll. This stuff is all going to work great. Okay. But the main thing I wanted to point out here was that, that everything has just been super soft leading up to this. There's been kind of no flushes of color or strength or passion or anything. And then suddenly we get this. This is really going to stand out. This is going to feel very sudden, almost jolting, right? Just setting aside the Garritan tremolo, which is a little kind of a little coarse and rumbly, rather than being kind of fervent and on the edge of the seat. All right, so but I really do like the way the resolution is scored right in here with the strings and clarinet family, a little touch of bassoon at the end there. Okay, so now here we get into what I feel is like the best balanced scoring so far. So bum 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 da 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 da, right? Really nice mixing of different sections together. A little bit of clarinet and like flutes and oboes joining in together. And yes, here you got the flutes an octave higher than the strings, and this is happening a lot with like strings, like the first violins not doubling the melody but playing an octave under. I just want to tell everybody that is not the most effective way to get a tone that feels like it's leading, right? It just really is a kind of a wind-based reach, you know what I mean? I mean, here you've got the intention of dropping the strings out and bringing in the brass very, very strongly, right? And there's a lot of overtones supporting the wind lines and everything else, and that is cool too. But yeah, I'm just seeing this so many times now. This is like about maybe the sixth or seventh time that I've seen this. And I don't feel that is the most effective approach with respect to everybody. Just to have, I mean, you'll still get a string sound, but you like the way that the pitch arcs is not necessarily going to have a sheen to it. I don't know. It's some other way of describing it, perhaps. But yeah. And this is really going to stand out. This forte note on piccolo, especially coming in cold. All right, just watch out for that. And especially like right in here, the winds are going to be supported by very, very bright overtones from our trumpets. And then bum 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 bum. That's really, really nice. The way that the French horns wrap things up right over the lower strings. This is all really nice scoring, Frank. Okay, da 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 bum. This was also really nicely done. Just very, very simple. Horns, lower winds, nice support here from the clarinets of the string line, and this will have a very, very cool sound to it, right? Rather than being fervent. Okay, then we get a little bit of extra color on top. This is really going to ring out. This high G sharp, or G flat, excuse me, is really going to ring out very powerfully over the top. It's like almost going to in a practical sense, is going to make people's ears kind of twist slightly as they're listening. Okay. And then the little resolution, right? That's nicely scored. Okay, and then continuing on. Bum 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 ba da 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 dum. This is a pretty cool arrangement, I've got to say. I mean, I want to evaluate more, but as you can hear from my voice, I've actually been pacing myself. People notice like I haven't been just churning out one after the other because I kind of have to save my voice. I don't think I could do 146 evaluations in a row, doing them every day without just starting to repeat myself all the time and not having that much imagination and also just having a hoarse, unpleasant voice all the time. So I'm just kind of pacing things out. It's going to take we're probably going to go a little bit past the end of this month in order for me to get them done. But it's cool, folks. Just hang in there. I'm not going to charge anybody any extra on Patreon or anything like that. It'll all work out. So just looking at this last bit, once again, scoring is pretty nice. Good celesta right in here and harp working together. and I like the freneticness of this. Even though it's really, yeah, once again, just really really softly scored. It's another example of an emotional peak, right? That is being scored down dynamically. I feel that this could have been a lot stronger going towards the end, and then once again, leading onwards, there's a very very soft section following. So maybe some of this triple P, double P kind of scoring is I mean it's sort of going to be there and it's sort of not. It sort of reminds me a little bit of the Schoenberg's 5 pieces score analysis series that I did a few months ago, where the brass are just playing incredibly soft textures, and brass can get down to a functional niente if they really want to, but there's always a projection. That's the thing. Like the clarinet can really control their projection, so and do really spooky things. They can actually push at a niente in terms of like the sound of the air going through the beak without really making the sound any louder. Just like if you're sitting next to it, it wouldn't really sound any louder, but they can project so that you can hear that whisper farther away. That's not quite something that brass does that well. I mean, brass is very directional, right? If you're standing in front of the bell, you can hear it the clearest. So, yeah, I'm not totally convinced that this incredibly soft textural approach right here is going to be as effective with so many other things around it. You see what I mean? Like it's a little bit like a really great $10 vocabulary word slipped into kind of slipped into a sort of a very ordinary conversation, right? It just feels like it's something that is getting a little bit lost, right? Whereas like everything else has this wonderful, like there's the lovely kind of rhythmic pressure coming from our strings here in these rhythmic subdivisions, and just like beautiful arcing phrases here from the winds, and this kind of beautiful sighing kind of sound. I feel like right around here, also from the lower winds, may get buried a little bit by what's going on the strings. So, I mean, that's just my feeling. I mean, some of the lower stuff is going to come through just because there isn't anything else. There's like no competition, right? So, yeah, so I'm just a little dubious about that. Here, I'm also not convinced by the slurring, right? I think that this is a mistake. I think you might have intended this slur to start here, right? But in terms of the slurring of the strings, is really nicely done. I'm not seeing the piano phrasing just dropped onto the strings. I feel that it's all working out pretty well. So yeah, so that's my evaluation of your score, Frank, and I really appreciate that you put a lot of work into this, and you you were pretty concerned that it would be presented in a in a way that did it justice, like not just your effort, but also on my behalf as your evaluator, as your coach for this one score, that that the materials that I'd have would help me help you, right? And I appreciate that a lot. So I would say just in terms of the overall scoring, I'm going to flip back through the allotted section of score. So I've already commented about this, okay? And then going back to this page, yeah, so just like some overall impressions is like I really appreciate how focused you are on texture and how you really are like kind of going the extra mile with dynamics and with blending. I mean, I'm so sympathetic to that. I feel that that is really that is a part of my scoring that I also pay attention to in a different way. You know, we're all very different as orchestrators, but I really do think that that's great. I just want to point out a few things, and that is like, don't let the overall focus get lost. Okay, always make sure that your elements, your melodic elements, and your harmonic elements, your accompaniment styles of the music and everything doesn't just wash together. Okay, because there's just a few moments in this piece where they, you know, they it feels a little bit like they are starting to kind of blend a little bit too much, right? So just like, I mean, there's a whole style of very kind of nebulous orchestration, which I think is fantastic. I don't have any criticism against it, but like in capturing the simplicity and the wonder, and like sort of the childlike wonder of this piece, might be, you know, just you might want to focus on just really making sure that certain functions are clear. All right, that would be my only warning, not a critique. Not saying that you didn't do that, but there are places where it feels like the music is becoming just a little bit hard, and it's becoming a little bit hard to like feel where those functions are playing against one another or doing their job. All right. Just turning back to the beginning, yeah, and you know, and then another thing is like really I feel that, like, you know, this question of dynamics is really one of tone color as much as it is of strength or of emphasis, right? It's also like, it's almost like opening a door, right? And that was one of the things I sort of felt about the beginning, was that it just really was, you know, like the door was being kept as, you know, as shut as possible. But I mean, it's easy to sort of like read that in the music too, isn't it? So I'm not going to be too critical about that. So, but really, I mean, such a great effort and so fantastic. I'm so happy that you shared the score with me, and it's kind of like, this is my second attempt to get all of the dotted semi-brev scores finished in a day, and so I tried to do it a couple days ago, and then I had to stop because of certain other things going on, and now I'm back to it. So this was a really great score to start off first thing in the morning with. So thanks again, Frank, and please, you know, feel free to enter a score anytime that I do these challenges in the future. And you know, I mean, you've got a lot of really great insights here and great ideas, and I think that your perspective on the other dotted semi-brev scores would be really valuable. So if you can just do me a huge favor and comment on their scores, either in the Patreon feed or here under the YouTube video in the comments of those other dotted semi-brev scores, that would really be fantastic. I would hugely appreciate that. So anyhow, on to the next score for me, and thank you so much once again, Frank, for supporting the channel and for your great entry.